From the outside, my stepmother looked flawless at my father's 68th birthday party, soaking up compliments while I quietly paid the bill. No one saw her drag me behind the hotel later that night or heard the slap that finally broke my silence. She thought she was untouchable, but she never expected my grandfather to find the recording on her own phone. That single mistake was about to cost her every penny she had spent a decade trying to steal. My name is Paisley Henry, and standing in the opulent ballroom of the Crescent Harbor Hotel, I felt less like a guest and more like a walking, breathing credit card. The air smelled of expensive lilies, beeswax polish, and the specific, cloying perfume that my stepmother, Vanessa Morgan, had been wearing since the day she moved into my childhood home. I was in my early 30s, a woman who commanded respect as a crisis response director at Ironclad Shield Security, a firm that handled threats for Fortune 500 companies. Yet, as I smoothed the fabric of my evening gown, I felt the familiar regression that always happened when I stepped back into the orbit of the Morgan family. I became small. I became silent. I became the wallet. The room was a masterclass in excess. Crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars dripped light onto the crowd below. A string quartet played in the corner, their music barely audible over the roar of polite conversation and the clinking of champagne flutes. Every detail, from the imported silk tablecloths to the towering floral wall that served as a photo backdrop, had been selected by Vanessa, and every single detail, down to the last linen napkin, had been paid for by me. The invoice for the venue alone was $15,000. The catering was another $8,000. I had wired the money 3 days ago, watching my savings account dip with that sickening lurch of anxiety I had grown so used to that it felt like a heartbeat. Vanessa was in her element. She swanned through the crowd in a custom-designed silver gown that hugged her figure, a glass of vintage rosé in one hand. She looked radiant, the very picture of the devoted wife throwing a milestone celebration for her beloved husband. My father, Daniel, was turning 68 today. He stood near the center of the room, beaming, his cheeks flushed with pride, and perhaps a little too much scotch. He looked happy. That was the trap. That was always the trap. If I stopped paying, his happiness would shatter. And somehow, in the twisted logic of this family, the debris would be my fault. I watched as Mrs. Galloway, the wife of one of my father's oldest golf buddies, grabbed Vanessa's hands. I could read lips well enough to know she was gushing about the decor. Vanessa threw her head back and laughed, a practiced, tinkling sound that made my teeth ache. She pointed toward the flowers, then toward the band, accepting the praise with a humble nod that suggested she had stayed up all night hot gluing the centerpieces herself rather than simply forwarding the invoices to my inbox. A hand touched my elbow. It was Mr. Henderson, a retired banker who had known me since I was in braces. "Paisley, dear," he said, his voice thick with admiration. "You look lovely, but I must say, you are so incredibly lucky." I blinked, forcing a polite smile. "Hello, Mr. Henderson. Lucky? How so?" "To have a woman like Vanessa in your life," he said, gesturing toward my stepmother. "Look at what she has done for your father. The woman is a saint. She organizes everything, takes care of the house, keeps the social calendar. Most stepmothers would not care half as much. You can focus on your career because she is carrying the load at home." The injustice of it burned in my throat like bile. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull out my phone and show him the bank transfers. I wanted to tell him that the load she carried was entirely financed by the overtime hours I worked dealing with data breaches and corporate espionage. But I did not. I had learned long ago that fighting the narrative Vanessa had constructed only made me look like the bitter, jealous stepdaughter she claimed I was. "She is certainly something," I said, the words tasting like ash. I excused myself and moved deeper into the room, my eyes scanning for the one person who might actually see me. My grandfather, Henry Morgan, sat at the head table in his wheelchair. At 89, his body was failing him. A stroke 2 years ago had weakened his left side and left him reliant on the chair, a fact that Vanessa constantly lamented with exaggerated sighs about the burden of caregiving. But as I looked at him, I saw what others missed. His posture was slumped, yes, but his eyes were sharp. They darted around the room, observing the excess, the performance, the waste. Before I could reach him, my father intercepted me. He wrapped an arm around my shoulder, pulling me into a circle of his friends from the yacht club, a club membership I paid for under the guise of a Christmas gift that renewed annually. "And here she is," Dad announced, his voice booming. "My little girl, Paisley. Say hello to the Thompsons." "Hi, Dad. Hello, everyone." "Paisley is still single. Can you believe it?" Dad laughed, clapping me on the shoulder a little too hard. "Married to her job. I am afraid. She works with computers." "Oh, like programming?" Mrs. Thompson asked politely. "Something like that," Dad answered for me, waving his hand dismissively. "She is good with tech. Helps us whenever the Wi-Fi goes down or when I forget my Netflix password. Very handy to have around." I tightened my grip on my clutch. I managed a team of 40 security analysts. Last month, I had coordinated the response to a ransomware attack that threatened to shut down a regional power grid. I had negotiated with cyber terrorists. But to Daniel Morgan, I was just the IT help desk. "And Vanessa," Dad continued, his eyes drifting lovingly to his wife as she approached us. "Now, she is the financial wizard. I tell you, I would be lost without her. She manages the accounts, the investments, the house repairs, a real powerhouse." Vanessa slid under his arm, resting her head on his shoulder. She looked at the group with wide, innocent eyes. "Oh, Daniel, stop. I just do what needs to be done for our family." She turned her gaze to me, her smile tightening just a fraction at the corners. "But we really have to thank Paisley for tonight. When I told her we should do something small, maybe a backyard barbecue to save money, she simply refused." My stomach dropped. "Here it comes." "She insisted," Vanessa told the group, her voice dripping with faux admiration. She said, "No, Dad deserves the best. I want to pay for the crescent. Money is no object for family. It was so sweet of you, Paisley, truly." The group cooed. "How generous," Mrs. Thompson said. I stood frozen. It was a masterstroke. By claiming I had insisted, she not only absolved herself of the extravagance, but also locked me into a position where I could not complain about the cost without looking cheap and ungrateful. If I said I had never offered, I would be calling my saintly stepmother a liar in front of my father's friends. "I just wanted Dad to have a good night," I managed to say, my voice flat. "And he is," Vanessa chirped. She checked her diamond watch, a gift from Dad for their 10th anniversary, bought with the proceeds of a bond my mother had left for me. "Oh, look at the time. I need to make sure the kitchen is ready for the main course." She bustled away, but I did not watch her go to the kitchen. My training at Ironclad taught me to watch the hands, to watch the quiet interactions in the corners of the room. I watched her detour. She did not go to the catering staff. She went to a table near the back, where a man in a gray suit was sitting alone. He did not look like a party guest. He had a leather briefcase at his feet. Vanessa leaned down, whispered something in his ear, and then guided him toward the head table, toward Grandpa Henry. I moved laterally through the crowd, keeping a line of sight. I watched as she leaned over Grandpa, placing a hand on his frail shoulder. She spoke softly, her face the picture of concern. Then, she pulled a few folded documents from the man's briefcase. I edged closer, pretending to examine the ice sculpture, straining to hear. "It is just the updated paperwork for the charity gala." "Henry," I heard her say, her voice smooth. "Like we discussed, the hospital needs your signature to release the donation pledge. You remember, do you not? You promised them last week." Grandpa looked at the papers, his thick white brows knitting together. He hesitated. Vanessa uncapped a pen and pressed it into his hand. "Here, just right here. We do not want to keep the nice man waiting, do we? He came all the way here just for this." It was a pressure tactic. Use the social setting. Use the presence of a stranger. Use his own confusion against him. Grandpa signed. He looked unhappy about it, but he signed. Vanessa snatched the papers back with a speed that betrayed her eagerness, handed them to the man in the suit, and patted Grandpa's cheek. Good man. I made a mental note of the man's face, receding hairline, scar on his chin, cheap suit. I would run him through facial recognition software on Monday. That was not charity paperwork. Paisley. I jumped as a hand grabbed my arm. It was my cousin Bella, holding a martini that was clearly not her first. Bella was 26 and had the discretion of a megaphone. Great party, Bella slurred slightly. Seriously, the shrimp are huge. Glad you are enjoying them, Bella. She leaned in close, her breath smelling of gin and olives. Hey, so I was talking to Vanessa earlier. It is so exciting about the plans for the estate. I mean, sad about Grandpa, obviously. But you know what I mean. My heart stopped beating for a second. What plans? Bella blinked. You know, the consolidation. She said that once Grandpa Henry passes, she's finally going to get control of the lake house property, and that you guys are going to downsize the main house, sell it to a developer or something. She said the maintenance is just too much for your dad, and it is time to cash out. The main house, my childhood home, the house my mother had designed, the house Grandpa Henry had built with his own construction crew 40 years ago. She said that? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Yeah. She said she's just waiting for the timeline to work out. Smart move. Honestly, that place is huge. Bella took a sip of her drink, oblivious to the fact that she had just dropped a bomb on my entire world. Anyway, I am going to go find the waiter with the crab cakes. I stood there, the noise of the party fading into a dull roar. Sell the house, sell the lake property. I had never heard a word about this. Grandpa had always said the lake house was to remain in the trust for the grandchildren. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out, expecting an alert from work. It was a text from Vanessa. Transferred the utilities to your account number. Need $500 for the electric and water bill this month. Rates went up. Please handle ASAP so Dad doesn't worry. I stared at the screen. My blood ran hot. I had paid the electric bill 3 days ago. I had the confirmation email. It was on autopay. The rates had not gone up. She was asking for $500 for a bill that was already paid. She was double-dipping. She was skimming cash, banking on the fact that I was too busy or too conflict-averse to check the receipt. I looked across the room. Vanessa was back at my father's side, laughing at a joke, her hand resting possessively on his chest. She looked so secure, so safe. I walked over to the head table. Grandpa Henry was alone now, staring at his untouched plate of salmon. He looked up as I approached, and the mask of the frail old man slipped just enough for me to see the iron underneath. "Grandpa," I said, leaning down to kiss his cheek. His skin felt like paper. "You look tired, kid," he rasped. His voice was low, a rumble that only I could hear. "It has been a long week," I lied. He reached out and gripped my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. He pulled me down closer, so our faces were inches apart. "Cut the crap, Paisley. They still sucking the life out of you? Or did you finally learn the word no?" I opened my mouth to defend them, to say that Dad needed help, that it was complicated, but the words died in my throat. I looked into his eyes that were the same shade of steel gray as mine, and I saw that he knew. He knew about the invoices. He knew about the emotional blackmail. He might not know the specifics, but he knew the dynamic. I faltered. "I am handling it, Grandpa." "Handling it is not the same as fixing it," he growled. "You are paying for this circus, aren't you?" I did not answer. He released my wrist, letting his hand drop to the armrest of his wheelchair with a heavy sigh. "You are too loyal for your own good. Your mother was the same way. It killed her." The mention of my mother was a sharp pang in my chest. "Do not say that." "Truth hurts," he muttered. He looked over my shoulder, his eyes narrowing. "Watch your back tonight, kid. She is moving pieces on the board. I can feel it." "What do you mean?" "That man with the papers," he whispered. He was not from the charity. He smelled like a lawyer, and not a good one. Before I could ask more, a spoon clinking against a glass rang out through the ballroom. The sound cut through the chatter. "Attention, attention, everyone!" Daniel stood at the center of the room, a microphone in his hand. The spotlight swung to him. Vanessa stood next to him, beaming, her hands clasped together in a posture of adoration. "If I could have everyone's attention," Dad boomed, his face flushed with joy. "My beautiful wife has prepared a special toast." The room went quiet. I stepped back into the shadows near a pillar, clutching my phone. The text message asking for $500 was still glowing on the screen. The knowledge of the secret meeting with the charity man sat heavy in my gut, and Bella's words about selling my childhood home echoed in my ears. As Vanessa took the microphone, flashing that $1,000,000 smile that I had paid for, I realized Grandpa was right. This wasn't a party. This was a stage. And whatever play she was directing, the final act was going to involve me losing everything I had left. I watched her take a breath, preparing to speak, and for the first time in years, I didn't just feel tired, I felt dangerous. I unlocked my phone and opened my banking app. It was time to start counting. As I stood in the shadow of a velvet-draped column, watching Vanessa charm a senator's wife with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes, the present moment began to blur. The expensive perfume, the clinking crystal, the murmur of polite society, it all faded, replaced by the scent of wet earth and lilies. I was 18 years old again. I was standing at a graveside in the pouring rain, my black dress soaking through to my skin, watching my father crumble as my mother was lowered into the ground. That was the day Vanessa Morgan truly entered our lives. She arrived not as a stepmother, but as a concerned friend from the country club, armed with casseroles and a sympathetic tilt of her head. I remember watching her hover over my father, while I stood alone, shivering. She was there to hold the umbrella over him. It was a small gesture, but it was prophetic. She created a dry, safe space for him, and I was left out in the cold. In the weeks that followed, the invasion was subtle. It started with helping out. She would come over to organize the pantry because Dad was too grief-stricken to cook. Then she was there to sort the mail because the bills were piling up. Within 3 months, she was sitting at the mahogany desk in my father's study, my mother's desk, typing on the computer with an air of supreme efficiency. "You focus on healing. Daniel," she would coo, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Let me handle the boring administrative stuff. You do not need the stress of numbers right now." And just like that, she held the keys to the kingdom. Passwords were changed for security. Bank statements went digital, accessible only through an email address she controlled. I was just a teenager, navigating my first year of grief and college applications, so I did not notice the walls going up until they were already built. The disparity in our lives became a chasm during my college years. Vanessa convinced my father that the best way to honor my mother's memory was to ensure I grew up resilient. "She needs to learn the value of $1, Daniel," she told him over dinner one night, while I picked at my food. "If we coddle her, she will never launch. Paisley is strong, she can handle it." So, while I attended a state university on a partial academic scholarship, working the graveyard shift at the campus IT help desk to pay for textbooks and ramen, Vanessa was busy spending the family fortune on investments to boost the family image. First, it was her interior design consultancy. She needed $10,000 for a website, business cards, and a home office renovation. She told Dad it would bring in passive income. It brought in 0 clients, but the office looked magnificent. Then came the lifestyle vlog phase. She needed the best cameras, lighting rigs, and travel budget to showcase aspirational living. That cost another $15,000. Dad signed the checks with a smile, convinced by her enthusiastic presentations that she was building an empire. Meanwhile, I was taping my worn-out sneakers together and praying my old laptop would survive one more semester. When I graduated and landed my job at Ironclad Shield Security, I thought the dynamic would change. I was making good money. I was a crisis response director. I was solving problems for CEOs and banks. I thought I had earned respect. I was wrong. I had simply become a bigger resource. The first time it happened, I had just received my first significant bonus. I took Dad and Vanessa out to dinner to celebrate. Over dessert, Vanessa sighed, a long, tragic sound that instantly commanded my father's attention. "What is wrong, honey?" Dad asked, his face lined with worry. "It is just the roof," she said, dabbing at her dry eyes with a napkin. "The contractor called. It is worse than we thought. $20,000. Daniel, I do not know where we are going to find it without dipping into your retirement, and I just cannot bear to do that to you." She looked at me. It was a predatory look, masked by a sad smile. "Paisley creates such safety for her clients," she said softly. "It must be nice to have that kind of security. We are just drowning over here trying to keep the old house standing." The trap was sprung. If I said no, I was the greedy daughter hoarding her wealth while her father's roof leaked. If I said yes, I was the hero. I wanted to be the hero. I wanted my father to look at me with the same adoration he directed at her. "I can help," I had said. "I can cover the roof." "Oh, Paisley!" Vanessa had squealed, clapping her hands. "Daniel, look at her! Our little savior! The family bank is open for business." She laughed as she said it, making it sound like a cute joke. The family bank. The nickname stuck. Over the years, it evolved into the wallet with legs, or our financial wizard, but the meaning was always the same. I was the extraction point. Every request was wrapped in emotional barbed wire. When she wanted a new luxury SUV because her sedan was unsafe, she invoked my safety. "You would not want your father driving around in a death trap, would you, Paisley?" When she wanted to remodel the kitchen, it was about legacy. "This is the heart of the home. Paisley, your mother would have wanted it to be beautiful for future grandchildren." That was her favorite weapon. My mother. She used a woman she had never met as a ventriloquist dummy to guilt me into compliance. I started paying the mortgage directly 2 years ago. Vanessa claimed cash flow was tight due to some market fluctuations, and if I could just cover the monthly payments temporarily, it would save the house. I agreed. I paid the property taxes. I paid the insurance. I told myself I was protecting my childhood home. I told myself I was securing an asset that would eventually be mine. I did not know then what I suspected now, that the house had been refinanced 3 times. The equity I thought I was protecting had been stripped out, dollar by dollar, to fund Vanessa's wardrobe, her spa treatments, and her endless social climbing. I was paying to paint a hollow shell. There was only one person who tried to stop the bleeding. My grandfather, Henry Morgan. About 4 years ago, shortly before his stroke, he had called me to his office at the trucking company he had built from the ground up. He handed me a check for $25,000. "What is this, Grandpa?" I asked. "A down payment," he grunted, not looking up from his paperwork. "For a condo, an apartment, something small. But yours?" "I am fine living at the house for now. Grandpa, it saves money." He looked up then, slamming his pen down. "No, you need bricks and mortar that have your name on the deed. Just your name. Separate from them. Separate from her." "Vanessa loves me, Grandpa," I said, the lie tasting sour even then. "Vanessa loves what you provide," he corrected. "Get out. Paisley. Build your own fortress." I took the check. I bought a small, bodacious condo in the city. It was the only thing I truly owned, the only financial document Vanessa could not touch. When she found out, she did not speak to me for a month. She told Dad I was abandoning the family unit, and that I was selfish for buying a second property when the main house needed so many repairs. I tried to set boundaries after that. I really did. I would tell myself, "This month, I say no. I cannot transfer the money for the country club dues this month. Vanessa," I said once over the phone, "I have my own bills." The reaction was instantaneous and nuclear. She did not yell. She disintegrated. She wept. She wailed about how hard she worked, how ungrateful I was. How she had sacrificed her best years raising a broken child. Then came the silence, and then came Dad. Paisley. His voice would be tired, beaten down. Just pay the dues. Please, she has been crying all day. I cannot take the stress. My heart cannot take it. Do it for me? And I would do it. I always did it. Because hearing my father beg broke something inside me that I did not know how to fix. I started keeping a ledger. It was a habit from my job. Documentation is survival. Every transfer, every loan that was never repaid, every exorbitant grocery bill I covered, every emergency medical expense that turned out to be elective cosmetic dermatology. I saved the receipts. I downloaded the bank confirmations. I kept them in an encrypted folder on my private server. I told myself I was keeping the records for tax purposes, or maybe for the day Dad finally woke up and asked where the money went. But deep down, I knew I was just cataloging my own exploitation. I was too exhausted to use the evidence. Fighting Vanessa was a full-time job, and I already worked 60 hours a week. It was easier to pay the ransom than to fight the kidnapper. The isolation happened slowly, like a frog boiling in water. My father's old poker buddies stopped coming around. Vanessa said they were bad influences, or that they drank too much. Grandpa Henry was slowly pushed to the periphery. Vanessa claimed his skepticism was toxicity, and that he was jealous of Daniel's happiness. She cut the phone lines of communication one by one, until she was the only operator connecting Daniel to the outside world. Which brought me back to the ballroom at the Crescent Harbor Hotel. I looked around the room again, seeing it with fresh eyes. The people dancing, the people drinking the champagne I paid for. None of them knew my mother. None of them knew the woman who had actually designed the house they all complimented. This was Vanessa's curated collection of friends. There was the realtor she was always whispering with. There was the owner of the boutique where she bought her gowns. There was the plastic surgeon who did her migraine treatments. They were celebrating my father. Yes, but they were celebrating him as an extension of her. He was the prop in her play, and I was the producer, standing in the wings, writing checks to keep the lights on. The injustice of it sat in my chest like a stone. I looked at my father, laughing at something a stranger said, oblivious to the fact that his daughter was counting the cost of every second of this night. I realized then that Grandpa Henry was right. This was not a family dynamic. It was a hostage situation. And tonight, something in the air felt different. The pressure was too high. Vanessa's smile was too wide. The desperation in her text messages was too sharp. The party was perfect. The flowers were perfect. The music was perfect. But beneath the surface, the rot was spreading. I could feel the vibrations of a collapse coming. I just did not know yet that the collapse would happen behind the hotel, near the dumpsters, where the facade of the perfect family would finally be beaten out of me. The applause following the speeches was still rippling through the ballroom when Vanessa steered me away from the head table. Her grip on my elbow was firm, disguised as an affectionate steer, but her nails dug into my skin through the silk of my dress. "Let us get some air, sweetie," she murmured, her voice pitched low enough that the guests nearby only heard the tone of a doting mother figure. "Just some girl talk, away from the noise." She guided me out of the main ballroom and down a long, plush corridor lined with faux antique mirrors and heavy velvet drapes. The air here was cooler, stripped of the body heat and the smell of roasted lamb that permeated the party. It was quiet, too quiet. This was the setting Vanessa always chose before she dropped a bomb, secluded enough to prevent witnesses, but public enough that I would feel pressured to keep my voice down. She stopped near a potted palm, turning to face me with a bright, brittle smile that did not reach her eyes. She smoothed the front of her silver gown, a nervous tic I had catalogued years ago. "What a night," she exhaled, fanning herself with a cocktail napkin. "Your father is over the moon. Paisley, truly, you have made him very happy." "I am glad he is enjoying it," I said, keeping my back straight against the wall. I checked my watch. "Was there something specific you wanted to talk about, Vanessa? I should probably get back to the guests. I am technically the host, after all." "Oh, hush," She waved a hand dismissively. The staff can handle the guests. That is what you paid them for. Is it not? No. I wanted to talk to you about something exciting. A surprise for your father. My stomach tightened. Vanessa's surprises usually came with an invoice attached. What kind of surprise? She stepped closer, invading my personal space, bringing with her that cloud of cloying perfume. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, the kind one uses to share a delicious secret. We are moving, she announced, her eyes gleaming. I blinked. Moving? What do you mean? Moving where? To the city center, she said, the words rushing out now. Riverside Towers. Have you seen them? They are magnificent. Paisley, floor-to-ceiling glass, 24-hour concierge, a heated pool, a gym. It is exactly the kind of lifestyle Daniel deserves. We have been talking about it for weeks, just dreaming. Really. But then, a unit opened up, a corner unit on the 30th floor. The view is to die for. I stared at her, processing the absurdity of it. My father loved his garden. He loved the creaky front porch of the house he had lived in for 40 years. He hated elevators. Vanessa, I said slowly, Dad loves the house. He planted those hydrangeas himself. Why would he want to move to a glass box in the city? He is getting older. Paisley, she said, her face instantly shifting into a mask of tragic concern. The stairs. You know his knees are not what they used to be. And the yard work? It is killing him. I cannot stand to watch him struggle with that lawnmower anymore. It breaks my heart. Riverside Towers is maintenance-free. It is about his health. She paused, waiting for me to agree, to validate her narrative of selfless caregiving. When I stayed silent, she pressed on. Anyway, we went to see the broker yesterday, just to look. But the market is so hot right now. Units are vanishing in hours. So, I told him to hold it. The air in the corridor seemed to drop 10 degrees. You told him to hold it? With what money? Vanessa? She laughed, a light, airy sound that grated on my nerves. Well, that is where you come in. Silly. We need the deposit to lock it down. It is substantial, I know. But for a property like this, it is an investment. We need $80,000 by Monday morning. $80,000. She said it as if she were asking to borrow a stick of gum. 80,000, I repeated, my voice flat. And you told the broker I would just hand that over? I told him my brilliant stepdaughter is a partner in this family, she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. I told him you would want to help your father retire in comfort. I may have mentioned you would wire the funds directly to escrow to save time. It is all set up. I felt a vein throb in my temple. The presumption was breathtaking. She had committed my life savings to a stranger based on a fantasy I had never agreed to. No, I said. Vanessa froze. Excuse me? No, I said again, louder this time. I am not giving you $80,000 for a condo Dad does not need. The house is fine. If the yard is too much, we can hire a landscaper for $200 a month. We do not need to move him to a luxury high-rise. Vanessa's expression hardened. The sisterly facade cracked, revealing the cold calculation underneath. She took a step back and crossed her arms. You really do not get it, do you? She said, her voice losing its sugary lilt. That house is a sinking ship. Paisley, the neighborhood, it is not what it used to be. Just last week, I saw people walking down the street who clearly did not belong there. It is dangerous. Do you want your father getting mugged on his own driveway? Is that what you want? The neighborhood is fine, Vanessa. It is one of the safest zip codes in the state. Property values are stagnating, she snapped. If we do not sell now, we will lose everything. This is a rescue mission. We sell the old place, move to Riverside, and suddenly we have a liquid asset. We can even keep the old house and rent it out if you are so sentimental about it. Turn it into an income stream. But we need cash to make the jump. Sell the house? The words hit me like a physical blow. You want to sell the house? Or rent it, or leverage it, whatever. She waved her hand impatiently. The point is, we need to get the equity out. It is sitting there doing nothing, dead money. Speaking of equity, I said, stepping forward, my own anger finally rising to meet hers. How much equity is actually left? Vanessa, I have been paying the mortgage for 2 years, but every time I ask to see the statements, you have an excuse. You say it is standard refinancing or complicated math. If you want to move, show me the papers. Show me the payoff amount on the current mortgage. Her eyes darted away for a fraction of a second. It was a tell, a massive one. Do not interrogate me, she hissed. I am trying to secure our future. You think you are so smart with your little corporate job, but you do not understand high finance. We have refinanced to optimize our tax position. It is standard. There is nothing for you to worry about. If there is nothing to worry about, show me the documents. I will show you nothing until you fix your attitude. She raised her voice, glancing down the hall to make sure we were still alone. Then, she leaned in, her face changing again. This time, she played her ace. You know, she said softly, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. Your grandfather is watching you tonight. He is watching all of us. Leave Grandpa out of this. I cannot, she smirked, because he and I had a very long talk this morning. He is getting old. Paisley, he knows he cannot hold on to that empire of his forever. He is looking for a successor, someone responsible, someone who takes care of family. My blood ran cold. What are you saying? I am saying that Henry is very concerned about who is going to look after Daniel when he is gone, she said, examining her manicured fingernails. He wants to leave his estate to someone who steps up, someone who ensures his son is living in a safe, secure environment like Riverside Towers. If you turn your back on this, if you refuse to help your father get out of that rotting old house, well, I would hate to see how that reflects on you in the final version of the will. She was using my grandfather's fortune, money he had built with his own hands, as a weapon to extort me. She was implying that if I did not buy her this condo, she would poison Grandpa's mind to cut me out. Grandpa would never agree to this, I said, my voice trembling with rage. He built that house. He hates apartments. He told me last month he hates looking down from high places. Oh, sweetie, Vanessa chuckled darkly. People change their minds when they are presented with the right perspective. I told him it was for Daniel's safety. And do you know what he said? He said, do whatever it takes. He is on board. He is just waiting to see if you are. She reached out and smoothed a stray hair from my forehead, a gesture that felt like a branding iron. So here is the deal, she whispered. You transfer the deposit on Monday. We announce the move. You look like the dutiful daughter, and everyone stays happy. If you walk away, well, do not blame me when the inheritance goes to a charity or to a trust managed by me. She pulled back, her smile returning as if a switch had been flipped. Think about it, but not for too long. The broker needs an answer by 9 a.m. She turned on her heel and glided back toward the ballroom, the silk of her dress swishing softly against the floor. I stood there in the silence, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie. Grandpa Henry would never agree to sell the house he built for my mother. He would never agree to move Daniel to a pretentious glass tower. But the confidence in her voice terrified me. She was so sure of her control over Daniel. And now she was claiming control over Henry, too. She wanted the condo because it was liquid. A house takes months to sell. A condo can be flipped. Or maybe she just wanted a property solely in her name, bought with my money, that she could leverage the moment the ink was dry. And the old house? If she had optimized the tax position, that was code for stripped equity. She had likely drained it dry, and now she needed to jump ship before the balloon payments hit. I pulled my phone from my clutch, my fingers shaking. I needed to verify this. I could not access the county clerk's office records on a Saturday night, but I knew someone who could. I opened a secure messaging app and typed a message to Marcus, a forensic accountant at Ironclad Shield Security. He owed me a favor after I covered his shift during the holidays. Paisley, I need a full property title search on 42 Oakwood Drive and a lien search on Daniel Morgan. I need to know every dime of debt attached to that address. Tonight. Marcus. On a Saturday? You serious? Paisley. Dead serious. I think someone is trying to liquidate my family's assets. I locked the phone and stared down the empty corridor. The music from the quartet drifted out, a cheerful melody that felt grotesque against the dread settling in my stomach. Vanessa had declared war. She thought she had cornered me with threats of disinheritance and guilt. She thought I was the same 18-year-old girl who stood in the rain at the funeral, desperate for approval. She did not realize that for the last 10 years, my job had been to assess threats and neutralize them. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and prepared to walk back into the party. I needed to see how far she would go. I needed to see if she would slip up. But as I walked back toward the light and the noise, I had no idea that the violence was not just metaphorical anymore. I thought the battlefield was the bank account. I did not know that before the night was over, the fight would move to the pavement behind the kitchen, and that the threat to my inheritance would become a threat to my physical safety. The stage was set, the players were in position, and I was walking straight into the ambush. The dinner service had ended, and the guests were mingling over coffee and petits fours, when my phone vibrated against my hip. I pulled it out, expecting another automated alert from work, but the name on the screen made my stomach tighten. It was Vanessa. Meet me at the loading dock behind the kitchen. There is a discrepancy with the final catering digital invoice. The system is locked. Need your tech magic ASAP, or they will not release the staff. I stared at the screen. It was a clumsy lie. The catering bill had been settled in full 48 hours ago. I had the confirmation receipt in my inbox. And even if there were a technical glitch, the hotel manager would handle it, not the hostess in a $3,000 gown. My instincts, honed by a decade of managing corporate crises, flared red. This was not about an invoice. This was an isolation tactic. She wanted me away from the crowd, away from the witnesses, and away from my grandfather's watchful eyes. I slipped my hand into my pocket and unlocked my phone. I did not open the camera. That was too obvious. Instead, I opened a high-fidelity audio recording app I used for boardroom depositions. I adjusted the gain to pick up whispers and tapped the large red record button. I watched the timer start counting seconds. 1, 2, 3, before sliding the phone into the breast pocket of my blazer, ensuring the microphone was facing outward. I walked through the service doors, the noise of the party cutting off abruptly as I entered the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway of the hotel kitchen. I navigated past racks of dirty dishes and shouting chefs until I pushed through the heavy steel exit doors leading to the loading dock. The night air was cold and smelled faintly of diesel and damp cardboard. The area was dimly lit by a single flickering security light. It was a blind spot. I knew from my own security assessment of the venue earlier that week that the cameras here were angled toward the delivery trucks, leaving a large shadow near the employee smoking area. Vanessa was waiting in that shadow. She was pacing back and forth, her silver heels clicking rhythmically against the concrete. When she turned to face me, the mask she had worn inside, the benevolent, doting wife, was gone. Her lipstick was slightly smeared, and there was a frantic, manic energy in her eyes that I had never seen before. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped and glued back together wrong. "You took your time," she snapped, her voice echoing off the brick walls. "I had to excuse myself from the guests," I said, keeping my voice level. "What is the problem with the invoice, Vanessa?" "Cut the act," she hissed, stepping out of the shadows. "You know exactly what the problem is. You are embarrassing me. Paisley, you are humiliating your father." "I am embarrassing him?" I asked, stepping closer but keeping a safe distance. "By paying for his party? By making sure his guests are fed?" "By wavering on the condo," she shouted. Though she quickly checked over her shoulder to ensure the door was shut, she lowered her voice to a venomous whisper. "I saw you talking to that accountant friend of yours on your phone. I saw the look on your face. You are planning to say no. Are you? You are going to let that deal fall through. I am not giving you $80,000 based on a conversation in a hallway. Vanessa," I said firmly, "that is not how I operate. It is not your money to decide on, she spat. It is family money. It is for your father's health. Do you have any idea what you are doing to him? His blood pressure is through the roof because he is so worried about the house. He is terrified. Paisley. And you are just standing there, clutching your purse, watching him suffer. If he is terrified, it is because you are terrifying him, I countered. Dad was fine with the house until you decided you wanted a penthouse view. He needs out of that money pit. Why? I asked. The question hung in the air, sharp and direct. Why is it a money pit? Vanessa, I pay the mortgage. I pay the taxes. I pay for the repairs. Why are you so desperate to sell a house that costs you $0 a month to live in? Vanessa froze, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She looked away, her chest heaving. We need the equity, she muttered. There is no equity left, is there? I said, the realization landing with the weight of a physical blow. That is why you need the $80,000. You cannot sell the house because you owe more than it is worth. You took out loans against it. She whipped her head back around, her eyes blazing. I did what I had to do. We had expenses. The business needed capital. Your father needed treatments. What treatments? He has been healthy for 5 years. You do not know everything, she screamed, stepping into my personal space. You think you know us because you write a check once a month? You know nothing. We are drowning. Paisley, the interest rates on the private loans adjusted last month. The payment tripled. If we do not get that condo, if we do not get a new asset to leverage, the bank is going to foreclose on the house within 90 days. We will be on the street. Is that what you want for your father? To be homeless at 68? I felt a cold shock wash over me. She had not just refinanced. She had taken out predatory private loans. She had gambled my childhood home on her vanity projects and lost. I am going to Grandpa, I said. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking in my pockets. And then I am going to a lawyer. We are going to audit every single piece of paper you have made Dad sign. The change in her was instantaneous. The panic that had been vibrating under her skin exploded into pure, unadulterated rage. You will not, she snarled. Before I could react, she lunged. She was faster than I expected. Her hand shot out and grabbed the lapel of my blazer, yanking me forward. The momentum threw me off balance, and she shoved me hard. My back slammed into the rough brick wall of the hotel with a force that knocked the wind out of me. You little wretch, she screamed. I raised my hands to push her away. My training kicking in. De-escalate. Create distance. But she was fueled by a decade of suppressed resentment. She swung her right hand and slapped me across the face. The sound was loud in the empty loading dock. The sting was immediate, hot and sharp across my cheekbone. Vanessa, stop, I gasped, grabbing her wrists. I spent 10 years cleaning up after you, she shrieked, struggling against my grip. She freed one hand and struck me again, a clumsy, closed-fist blow that caught me on the shoulder. I cooked his meals. I washed his clothes. I listened to his boring stories about the good old days. I earned every single penny in that house. You are hurting me, I said, trying to pin her arms without hurting her, conscious even now of the legal implications if I struck back. Let go! You think you can just walk away? She panted, her face inches from mine, her breath smelling of sour wine. You think you can cut us off? You ungrateful, selfish brat. I raised you. I tried to be a mother to you. You stole from me, I yelled back, finally shoving her away. She stumbled back a few steps, her heels scraping on the concrete. She did not fall, but she looked wild, her hair coming loose from its pins. She pointed a shaking finger at me. I did not steal anything, she hissed. I took what was owed, and I will take more. You think you have power because you have a job? I own him, Paisley. I own your father. He does not breathe without checking with me first. He will leave you when he finds out about the loans. Vanessa laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. He will never leave me. I have isolated him so thoroughly, he thinks the sun rises and sets on my command. And let me tell you something else. Little Miss Security Director, you think your money is safe? She took a step forward, lowering her voice to a terrifying growl. I have papers signed, sealed, and dated that give me power of attorney over his entire estate if he is incapacitated. And with the stress you are causing him, who knows, maybe he has a stroke tomorrow. Maybe he falls down the stairs. My blood ran cold. Are you threatening him? I am telling you the reality. She smiled, and it was the most chilling thing I had ever seen. And as for you, do not think I do not know about your precious brokerage account, the one with the $200,000 in it. I froze. I had never told anyone about that account, not even my father. How do you know about that? Daniel knows all your passwords, does he not? She taunted, adjusting her dress as if she hadn't just assaulted me. Or at least, he knew the answers to your security questions. What was the name of your first pet? What street did you grow up on? It was so easy to reset your access. I have been watching your portfolio grow for 6 months. I know every trade you make. I know every dividend you receive. And I know exactly how to drain it before you can even call the bank. She had committed identity theft. She had used my father to unknowingly hack his own daughter. That is a felony, Vanessa, I whispered. It is only a felony if you can prove it, she sneered. And who are they going to believe? The devoted wife who threw a beautiful party? Or the hysterical, jealous stepdaughter who attacked her mother behind a dumpster? She smoothed her hair, took a deep breath, and visibly recomposed herself. The transformation was terrifying. In 3 seconds, the monster vanished, and the socialite returned. Fix your face, she said coldly, gesturing to my red cheek. You look like a mess. If you do not transfer that $80,000 by Monday morning, I will tell your father you struck me. I will bruise myself if I have to. I will get a restraining order, and you will never see him again. She turned and walked back toward the steel doors. She paused with her hand on the handle, looking back at me one last time. Do not test me. Paisley, you are playing a game you do not know the rules to. Go home, cry in your pillow, but send the money. The heavy door slammed shut behind her, leaving me alone in the silence of the loading dock. I slumped against the brick wall, my legs suddenly turning to water. My cheek throbbed where she had slapped me, and my shoulder ached. I touched my face, my fingers coming away trembling. I had faced hostile employees, aggressive ex-spouses of clients, and cyber-terrorists, but I had never felt violence like this. This was intimate. This was hatred that had been fermenting for a decade. I stood there for a long minute, just breathing, trying to stop the shaking in my hands. Then, slowly, I reached into my breast pocket. My phone was still warm. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. The red counter was still ticking. 11 minutes and 42 seconds. I tapped stop. I tapped play. The sound was crystal clear. Vanessa's voice cut through the night air, sharp and undeniable. We need the equity. The bank is going to foreclose. I own him, Paisley. I have papers signed. I have been watching your portfolio. It was so easy to reset your access. And then, the sound of the struggle, the sound of the slap, the sound of her threat to frame me. I closed my eyes, a single tear leaking out, not from pain, but from relief. She thought she had buried me. She thought she had stripped me of my power. But in her arrogance, she had handed me the shovel to dig her grave. I checked the cloud sync status. Upload complete. The file was already on my encrypted server. It was on my laptop at home. It was safe. I wiped my face, straightened my blazer, and looked at the steel door. She was right about one thing. I did not know the rules of her game. But that was because I was done playing her game. I was about to start a new one, and she had no idea that the referee, my grandfather, was waiting for the opening whistle. I pushed off the wall, wincing slightly, and began to walk. Not back to the party. I could not face them yet. I needed to find Grandpa Henry, and I needed to make sure that when I played this recording, there was no way out for her. In that alleyway, I finally stopped feeling like the victim. I was the one building the case now, and she was the one who should be afraid. I walked back into the ballroom, and the transition was jarring enough to make me dizzy. 1 minute I was inhaling diesel fumes and dodging physical blows in a loading dock. The next, I was submerged in the golden glow of chandeliers and the polite hum of a string quartet. My face throbbed. I could feel the heat radiating from my left cheek where Vanessa had slapped me. I kept my head down, letting my hair fall forward like a curtain, and made a beeline for the powder room to check the damage. But before I could get there, I saw a hand rise in the air from the head table. It was Grandpa Henry. He did not wave. He simply held up 2 fingers, a signal we had used when I was a child and wanted to escape a boring family dinner. Come here. I hesitated. I did not want him to see me like this. I did not want him to see the red welt blooming on my skin or the way my hands were trembling in the folds of my dress, but his gaze was locked on me, steady and unyielding. He was 89 years old and confined to a wheelchair. Yet in that moment, he looked like the formidable union negotiator he had been in the 1970s. I walked over, approaching him from the side to keep my injured cheek turned away from the rest of the table. "Grandpa," I said, forcing a smile that felt tight and brittle. "Can I get you some water?" He did not answer. He reached out with his good hand and gripped my forearm. His fingers were cool and dry, but his grip was iron. He pulled me down, ignoring my resistance, until my ear was level with his mouth. "Stop hiding it," he rasped, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in my chest. "Turn your face." I froze. "It is nothing, just an allergy flaring up." "Bull," he whispered. He reached up and brushed my hair back. His eyes narrowed as he inspected the skin. He did not gasp. He did not look shocked. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield damage report. "She hit you." It was not a question. "We had a disagreement," I whispered back, my voice cracking. "A disagreement is words," he said, his jaw tightening. "This is assault. Did she finally drop the mask, kid? Did the saint finally show you her fangs?" "I have it on tape," I breathed, the secret rushing out of me before I could stop it. "I recorded everything. But Grandpa, we have to be careful. She is desperate. She threatened to hurt you. She threatened to drain my accounts. She is spiraling." "She thinks she is the predator," Henry muttered, a dark glint entering his eyes. "She forgot there are bigger things in the woods." "I need to show you," I said. "But not here, not with her watching." "Well, speak of the devil," Henry said, his eyes shifting to something over my shoulder. I straightened up just as Vanessa materialized. She had fixed her hair and reapplied her lipstick, erasing the wild woman from the loading dock. She looked composed, but I could see the frantic energy vibrating under her skin. She was holding her phone, a sleek, oversized model in a distinctive platinum case, in a death grip. "There you two are," she chirped, her voice a little too high, a little too breathless. She squeezed in between me and Grandpa, effectively boxing me out. "Henry. Dear, I have been looking for you. I noticed earlier that your phone seemed to be acting up. You missed a call from the caterer." "My phone is fine," Henry said, his tone flat. "Nonsense," Vanessa insisted, reaching into the side pocket of his wheelchair bag where he kept his device. "It was lagging when I checked the time earlier. Let me take a look. I can clear the cache for you. You know how technology gets when you do not update it." I watched, paralyzed by her audacity. She was not fixing anything. She pulled his phone out. It was the exact same make and model as hers, encased in a nearly identical silver cover because she had insisted on matching family tech last Christmas. She unlocked it with the code she had undoubtedly memorized months ago. "Just give me a second," she muttered, her thumbs flying across the screen. She was not clearing the cache. I watched her eyes darting. She was opening his email, then his banking app. She was forwarding something to herself. "Vanessa," I said, stepping forward. "Grandpa can handle his own phone." "Hush, Paisley," she snapped, not looking up. "I am helping, unlike some people who just cause stress." She was holding her own phone in her left hand and Grandpa's in her right, multitasking with a manic intensity. I realized she was likely transferring contact files, or perhaps authorizing a device recognition protocol so she could access his accounts from her own phone later. "Oh, a waiter!" she suddenly exclaimed, looking up as a server passed with a tray of vintage red wine. At that exact moment, the phone in her left hand, her phone, began to ring loudly. The screen lit up with the name Mortgage Broker. Urgent. Vanessa flinched. The ringtone was shrill, cutting through the ambient noise. She looked panicked. She could not answer the broker in front of Henry, but she could not ignore a call that was likely about the foreclosure she had screamed about in the alley. She slammed both phones down on the small cocktail table next to Henry's wheelchair to grab a glass of wine, trying to mask her panic with a sudden need for alcohol. The two silver phones sat side by side, looking like twins. I need to take this," she stammered, staring at the ringing phone. Grandpa Henry saw the opening. He did not know the specifics of the plan, but he knew how to create chaos. He suddenly lurched forward in his chair, waving his arm frantically at a man walking by. "Senator! Senator Worthington!" Grandpa bellowed, his voice surprisingly loud. "Over here! You owe me an explanation for that zoning bill." Vanessa jumped, startled by the sudden outburst. The senator turned, looking confused. The waiter with the wine tray paused, blocking Vanessa's path. In the confusion, I saw my chance. I did not think. I just acted. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my own phone, also a silver model, though slightly older, and placed it on the table as I pretended to stumble, knocking my purse over. "Oops," I said, creating a flurry of motion. Vanessa, flustered by Grandpa's shouting and the ringing phone, reached down blindly. She grabbed a phone. She silenced the ringing, shoved the device into her purse, and plastered a fake smile on her face. "I will just be a moment," she called out, backing away toward the restrooms where she could talk to the broker in private. "Grandpa is just being spirited." She disappeared into the crowd. I looked at the table. There was one phone left. I picked it up. It was heavy. The screen was still unlocked from where she had been using it. I looked at the background wallpaper. It was not my grandfather's picture of his old construction crew. It was a selfie of Vanessa, filtered to perfection. She had taken my phone, and I was holding hers. Grandpa Henry stopped shouting at the senator the moment Vanessa was out of sight. He turned to me, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of mischief and steel. "Did we get it?" he asked softly. "Better," I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "She took my phone. I have hers." "Your phone has the recording," Henry said, his brow furrowing. "It does not matter," I said, gripping Vanessa's device. "My recording is already in the cloud. It is encrypted. She cannot delete it even if she guesses my passcode. But this," I held up her phone, "this is the keys to the castle." "Go," Henry commanded, spinning his wheelchair around. "My private suite, now." We moved through the crowd like ghosts. I pushed his wheelchair, ignoring the questions from guests, moving swiftly toward the private elevators that led to the suite Henry maintained at the hotel for events like this. Once we were inside the silent, plush room, I locked the door. My hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from adrenaline. "Check it," Grandpa ordered. I sat on the sofa next to him and looked at Vanessa's phone. It was still unlocked. She had set the auto lock to 5 minutes, a lazy security habit I had warned her about years ago. "Thank you for being technically illiterate, Vanessa," I muttered. I opened her email app first. It was a treasure trove of betrayal. There were threads with predatory lenders, outlining loan terms with interest rates that made my stomach turn. There were emails to a real estate agent titled, "Confidential Listing, 42 Oakwood Drive." But then I opened her photos. "Grandpa," I said, my voice trembling, "look at this." Vanessa had a habit of screen recording her video calls. It was narcissism. She liked to watch herself speak. I tapped on the most recent video, dated 2 days ago. On the small screen, Vanessa was sitting in her car, talking to a man who looked like the mortgage broker. She was laughing. "Do not worry about the old man," digital Vanessa said, flipping her hair. He is practically senile. I just put a pen in his hand and he signs whatever I want. And the daughter? Please. She is a wallet with legs. I tell her to jump. She asks how high and writes a check for the landing pad. Grandpa Henry watched the video, his face turning into a mask of stone. He did not say a word, but his grip on the armrest of his wheelchair tightened until his knuckles were white. I scrolled further. There were screenshots of my investment dashboard. She was not lying, I whispered. She really did hack my accounts. I opened the browser history. The most recent tabs were how to reset Vanguard password without email, power of attorney loopholes, and assisted living facilities with no visitation rights. She was planning to lock you away, I said, looking at Grandpa. No visitation rights. She was going to warehouse you so she could sell everything. Grandpa closed his eyes for a brief moment. When he opened them, the sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She underestimated us. Paisley, he said softly. She thought because I sit in a chair and you pay the bills, we were weak. Suddenly, a sharp buzzing sound filled the quiet room. It was coming from Grandpa's wrist, his smartwatch. He lifted his arm and tapped the screen. He squinted at the notification, then let out a short, dry laugh. Well, he said, that settles it. What is it? Security alert from my primary holding bank, he read, his voice calm. A request has been made to change the primary beneficiary on the family trust. It requires two-factor authentication. He looked at me. Then he looked at the phone in my hand. Vanessa's phone. A notification banner dropped down from the top of Vanessa's screen. Verification code, 884291. Do not share this code with anyone. She is trying to do it right now. I realized, horror washing over me. She has your phone. She thinks she is in the clear. She is trying to write herself into the will before the night is over. She is using my phone to trigger the request, Grandpa said, a savage grin spreading across his face. But she forgot that I have the authentication app linked to her number as a backup from when she set it up for me 3 years ago. He looked at the code on her phone screen. She is waiting for that code to pop up on my phone, he said. But it popped up on hers because I never updated the recovery device. She is sitting in a bathroom stall right now, staring at your phone, wondering why the code isn't arriving, I said. Let her wait, Grandpa said, leaning back in his chair. She just handed us the final nail in the coffin. Attempted wire fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. We have it all. Paisley. We have everything. I looked at the platinum phone in my hand. It felt heavier than before. It was no longer just a communication device. It was a weapon. And for the first time in 10 years, the weapon was pointing the right way. What do we do now? I asked. Grandpa Henry adjusted his cuffs. Now we let her think she has won for exactly 1 more hour. We let her dig the hole a little deeper, and then we bury her. The silence in the private suite was heavy, but for the first time all night, it did not feel oppressive. It felt like the calm inside a bunker before the artillery begins to fire. Grandpa Henry sat in his wheelchair, staring at the platinum phone in my hand as if it were a loaded gun. The anger that had flared in him downstairs had cooled into something far more dangerous. Calculation. I knew it, he said, his voice rough with a mixture of vindication and grief. I knew she was isolating him, but I thought it was just emotional. I thought she was just jealous. I never thought she was actively dismantling the estate while I was still breathing. He wheeled himself over to the small mahogany desk in the corner of the room and pulled out a secure landline phone, the kind that did not rely on the hotel's public switchboard. Who are you calling? I asked, my thumb hovering over the screen of Vanessa's phone. Marion Cole, he said, lifting the receiver. She is the best trust and estate litigator in the state. I have been meeting with her secretly for a year. I blinked, surprised. You have? You think I did not notice when your father stopped coming to Sunday brunch? Grandpa asked, his eyes sharp. You think I did not notice when my calls to the house started going to voicemail, and only Vanessa would call back? I suspected she was driving a wedge. I just needed to know how deep the rot went before I cut the limb off. He dialed the number from memory. It was nearly 10 at night on a Saturday. But Marion answered on the second ring. That was the kind of lawyer she was. "Henry?" Her voice came through the speakerphone, crisp and alert. "Is everything all right? I did not expect to hear from you until our meeting on Tuesday." "Plans have changed, Marion," Grandpa said. "We are accelerating the timeline. Tonight." "What happened?" "She hit Paisley," Grandpa said. The words hung in the air, brutal and simple. There was a pause on the other end, a shuffling of papers. "Is Paisley safe? Do we need police?" "I am safe," I said, stepping closer to the desk. "And we have more than just a bruise. Marion, we have a confession, and we have her phone." "Put me on speaker," Marion commanded. "Tell me exactly what you have." For the next 10 minutes, I laid it out. I explained the ambush behind the kitchen, the demand for $80,000, the admission that the house was over-leveraged, the threat to leverage power of attorney, and finally, the physical assault. "I have it recorded," I said. "Crystal clear audio." "Play it," Marion said. "I need to hear the tone. I need to hear the intent." I pulled up the file from my cloud drive on the suite's computer. Not wanting to touch my own phone, which was still in Vanessa's possession, I clicked play. The room filled with the sounds of the loading dock, the wind, the distant traffic, and then Vanessa's voice, shrill and cruel. "I own him. Paisley. I have papers signed." Then came the slap. It sounded wet and violent against the silence of the room. Grandpa flinched. His hand gripped the edge of the desk so hard his knuckles turned white. He looked at me, his eyes watering with fury, but he stayed silent. When the recording ended, there was a long silence on the line. "Okay," Marion said, her voice devoid of emotion now, replaced by cold, legal strategy. "That is a smoking gun, but we do not fire it yet." "What?" I exclaimed, the adrenaline spiking in my blood. "She assaulted me. She is downstairs right now, holding court, drinking champagne paid for with my money. I want to go down there and play this over the speaker system." "And if you do that," Marion cut in sharply, "she will claim you provoked her. She will claim it was a mutual altercation. She will claim the audio is edited. She will cry. She will faint. And she will play the victim. She is a master manipulator. Paisley. If you confront her while emotions are high, she controls the narrative." "Marion is right," Grandpa said, though he looked like the words tasted like ash. "We cannot just embarrass her. We have to bury her." "We need to be methodical," Marion continued. "We need to establish a pattern of financial abuse that makes the physical abuse the undeniable climax of a crime, not just a family spat. Paisley, I need you to secure that recording. 3 locations." "Already done," I said. "It is on my encrypted cloud. I am sending a copy to your secure portal right now, and I am emailing a copy to Grandpa's private server." "Good," Marion said. "Now, regarding the phone you have, Vanessa's phone, do not turn it off. Do not use it to send messages, but if you can, I need you to export her transaction history." I looked down at the device. "I can do better than that. I can map her entire digital footprint." "Here is the plan," Marion said. "Tomorrow is Sunday. The land registry office is closed, but I have a contact who can pull the digital deeds. I want to see every lien, every second mortgage, every refinance application on that house. I want to know if Daniel's signature was forged or if he signed under duress." "She said she has power of attorney," I reminded her. "If she used a power of attorney to enrich herself, that is a breach of fiduciary duty," Marion said. "That is fraud. We can pierce the corporate veil. We can go after her personal assets." "She does not have any personal assets," Grandpa grunted. "She spends it as fast as she steals it." "Then we go for the kill shot," Marion said. "Henry, you mentioned a dinner." "The legacy dinner," Grandpa said, a grim smile touching his lips. "I was going to host it next month to announce the new trust. We will move it up." When? Tomorrow night, Grandpa said. At the lake house. It is private, no public, no waiters to cause a scene, just family. And you, Marion. I will be there, she said. Bring the evidence. Bring the accountant. Leo, Grandpa nodded. I will call him next. One more thing, Marion warned. Paisley, this is the hardest part. You have to go back down there. You have to give her back her phone, and you have to act like nothing happened. My stomach dropped. You want me to hand her back the evidence? You have the copy, Marion said. If you keep her phone, she will panic. She will wipe it remotely if she figures out you have it, or she will call the police and accuse you of theft. We need her to feel safe. We need her to think she got away with it. Give her 24 hours of false victory. Let her sleep soundly tonight. It will make the fall tomorrow much harder. I looked at Grandpa. He nodded slowly. It is a trap, kid, he said softly. We are baiting the trap. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to throw the platinum phone against the wall. Okay, I can do it. Good, Marion said. I will see you at the lake house tomorrow. Do not engage with her tonight. Gray rock method. Be boring. Be brief. Get out. Grandpa hung up the phone. He immediately picked it up again and dialed Leo Franklin, his forensic accountant of 30 years. Leo, Grandpa barked into the receiver. Wake up. I need you to pull a full audit on Daniel's accounts. Yes, tonight. I do not care if the bank is closed. Use the backdoor access you set up for the trust. I want a spreadsheet of every dollar that woman has touched in the last 5 years. Bring it to the lake house tomorrow. While Grandpa barked orders at Leo, I sat down at the desk with my laptop. I connected Vanessa's phone with a cable I found in Grandpa's bag. I did not just copy the photos. I ran a full mirror dump of the device's memory. Every deleted text, every location ping, every browser cookie. As the progress bar crawled across the screen, I started building my own timeline. I opened a spreadsheet and began to type. September 2018. Vanessa requests $15,000 for home office renovation. October 2018. Transfer of $12,000 from Daniel's account to V. Morgan Consulting. November 2018. Credit card charge of $8,000 at a luxury spa resort in Sedona. No renovation permits filed. I cross-referenced the dates with my own bank transfers. January 2020. Paisley transfers $5,000 for emergency HVAC repair. January 2020. Vanessa purchases Chanel handbag. Value $4,800. HVAC repair invoice non-existent. The pattern was sickeningly clear. It wasn't just mismanagement. It was systemic siphoning. She treated us like renewable resources. She mined my father for equity and mined me for cash flow. She is a parasite, I whispered, staring at the screen. Grandpa hung up the phone with Leo and wheeled himself over to me. He placed his hand on my shoulder. She is done, he said. I believed her for so long, I said, my voice shaking. I thought I was helping Dad. I thought if I just paid enough, if I was good enough, she would stop. That is how the trap works. Paisley, Grandpa said gently. She used your goodness against you. She knew you would never let your father sink, so she drilled holes in the boat just to watch you bail water. He turned my chair so I was facing him. His eyes were watery, but his voice was fierce. I made a mistake, he said. I stayed quiet too long because I did not want to lose Daniel. I thought if I intervened, he would choose her and cut me off. I was a coward. You are not a coward, Grandpa. I was, he insisted, but I am not anymore, and I am making you a promise right now. Whatever is left of this estate, the business, the properties, the trust, it goes to the person who defended it. It goes to you. Not because you are my blood, but because you are the only one with the spine to stand up to the wolf at the door. I do not want the money, I said, and I meant it. I just want my father back. I want my house back. You will get the house, he vowed, and we will try to get your father back, but even if he is too far gone, you have me. You are not fighting this alone anymore. I looked at him, really looked at him, for years. Vanessa had painted him as a senile, out-of-touch old man. She had tried to make me see him as a burden, but sitting here, plotting a tactical dismantling of a fraudster, I saw the man who had built a trucking empire from a single pickup truck. "We have to go back down," I said, checking the download status. Complete. "She will be panicking about her phone." "Let us go," Grandpa said. "Remember, you are tired, you are beaten, you are compliant." "I am the wallet," I said, standing up and disconnecting the phone. "I am just the tech support." We took the elevator back down in silence. When the doors opened to the lobby, the noise of the party washed over us again. We found Vanessa near the bar. She was frantic, dumping the contents of her purse onto a high-top table, ignoring the stares of the guests. Her face was pale. "Looking for this?" I asked, walking up behind her. She spun around, her eyes wide with terror. When she saw her phone in my hand, the relief that washed over her face was so intense she almost collapsed. "Oh, thank God," she gasped, snatching it from my hand. "Where did you find it? I have been looking everywhere." "You left it on the table with Grandpa's," I said, keeping my voice dull and flat. "I picked it up by mistake when I took him to the restroom. Sorry, they look so alike." She clutched the phone to her chest, her eyes darting over my face, searching for a sign that I knew, that I had seen the emails, that I had seen the verification code. I touched my bruised cheek, flinching slightly as if in pain. I let my shoulders slump. I looked at the floor. "I am going home, Vanessa," I mumbled. I will think about the money. For the condo, I will let you know on Monday." Her eyes lit up. She interpreted my defeat as submission. She thought the slap had worked. She thought she had beaten me into line. "Good," she breathed, her confidence returning in a rush. That is the right decision. Paisley, go home. Put some ice on that face. We will talk Monday." She turned away, already unlocking her phone to check if she had missed the bank transfer window. She didn't notice Grandpa Henry watching her from his wheelchair, a predator's smile playing on his lips. "See you at dinner tomorrow, Vanessa," Grandpa said cheerfully. "At the lake house. I have a big announcement about the estate." Vanessa froze, then turned back, beaming. "Oh, Henry, that is wonderful. We will be there." She thought the announcement was her victory. She thought she had won. As I walked out of the hotel into the cool night air, leaving the suffocating perfume and lies behind me, I took the first deep breath I had taken in 10 years. I had a bruise on my face, I had a depleted bank account, but for the first time, I had the weapon that would end the war. Tomorrow night, we would not just be eating dinner, we would be serving justice, and it was going to be served cold. The drive to my grandfather's lake house took 45 minutes, winding through dense pine forests that felt like they were closing in on the road. It had been exactly 7 days since the incident behind the hotel. 7 days of silence. 7 days of letting Vanessa Morgan believe she had won the war. Grandpa Henry had insisted on the delay. He wanted the trap to be airtight. He wanted every bank statement, every forged signature, and every digital footprint documented in triplicate before we gathered everyone together. He called it letting the concrete set. So, for a week, I had played the role of the defeated stepdaughter. I had answered Vanessa's texts with short, submissive replies. I had told her I was looking into liquidating some assets to help with the condo deposit. I let her bask in the glow of her perceived victory. Now, as I pulled my modest sedan up the gravel driveway of the estate, I saw that the stage was set. The lake house was a sprawling structure of stone and timber, built by my grandfather 30 years ago. It usually felt warm, a place of summer barbecues and fishing trips. Tonight, however, under the gray, overcast sky, it looked like a courthouse. Vanessa's leased luxury SUV was already parked out front, taking up 2 spots. It was freshly washed, gleaming aggressively against the muted backdrop of the woods. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I was wearing a navy blue dress, high-necked and tailored. No jewelry, hair pulled back tight. I looked severe. I looked like I was going to a funeral. Which, in a way, I was. I was here to bury the lie that had consumed my family for a decade. I walked up the stone steps, taking a deep breath of the cool lake air. The front door opened before I could knock. It was Mrs. Higgins, Grandpa's housekeeper, who had been with us since I was a toddler. She did not smile. She just nodded at me, her eyes darting toward the living room, a silent warning that the show had already begun. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, blocking out the view of the water, and the room was lit by the dim glow of vintage lamps. "There she is," Vanessa's voice cut through the gloom, bright and jarring. She was standing by the fireplace, wearing a cream-colored silk blouse and gold trousers, holding a crystal tumbler of scotch. She looked victorious. She looked like the lady of the manor. "We were just worried you might not make it, Paisley," she said, walking over to me but stopping just short of a hug. "Traffic can be so terrible for people who commute from the city." "I made good time," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I looked past her to find my father. Daniel was sitting in a wingback chair near the fire, clutching a glass of water. He looked smaller than I remembered. His skin was pale, and his eyes had a glassy, unfocused quality that made my chest ache. "Hi, Dad," I said, walking over to him. He looked up, blinking slowly. "Paisley, you are here. Good, good." He patted my hand, his touch weak. "We are so lucky, aren't we? Henry bringing us all together like this. Vanessa was just saying how blessed we are that he is finally putting the affairs in order. So lucky." He sounded like a recording. The cadence was wrong. It was the same phrase Vanessa had used in her text messages to me all week. "We are so lucky." She had drilled it into him until it was the only thought his tired mind could hold on to. "Yes, Dad," I said softly. "We will see how it goes." "And who is this?" Vanessa asked, turning her attention to the corner of the room. Standing by the bookshelf was Marion Cole. Marion was a master of camouflage. Tonight, she wore a gray wool suit and thick-rimmed glasses, looking every bit the boring, low-level bureaucrat. She held a thick leather folder against her chest. "This is Marion," I said. "She is assisting Grandpa with some of the paperwork tonight. He asked her to sit in." Vanessa glanced at Marion with a look of supreme disinterest. She saw a notary. She saw a secretary. She did not see one of the most ruthless trust litigators in the state. "Well, as long as she does not slow us down," Vanessa sniffed, turning her back on Marion. "We have champagne cooling in the dining room. Henry insisted on the good stuff." Grandpa Henry wheeled himself into the room from the hallway. He was dressed in a three-piece suit, freshly shaved, sitting upright in his chair. He did not look frail tonight. He looked like a king holding court. "Dinner is served," he announced, his voice booming. We moved into the dining room. The long mahogany table was set for 12. Though there were only 8 of us, including Marion, I noticed the seating arrangement immediately. It was surgical. Grandpa was at the head. To his immediate right sat Aunt Paula, my mother's sister, who had always suspected Vanessa but never had proof. To his left sat Cousin Nate, a police detective who had driven 3 hours to be here at Grandpa's request. Vanessa was placed halfway down the table, isolated. Beside her was an empty chair. Across from her sat my father. I was seated at the far end, opposite Grandpa, flanking Marion. Vanessa frowned slightly as she looked at her placement, clearly expecting to be at Grandpa's right hand, but she recovered quickly. She pulled out Daniel's chair for him, guiding him into it with a showy display of caregiving. "Careful, darling," she cooed. "You know how your back gets." As the soup was served, a dark, rich mushroom bisque, the silence in the room was heavy. The only sounds were the clinking of silver against china. "So," Vanessa began, unable to tolerate the quiet. She raised her glass. "I think a toast is in order, to Henry, for bringing us together and for finally securing the future. I know we have had our little stresses, but it feels like we are entering a new chapter, a chapter of unity." She looked at me when she said unity, a smug little smile playing on her lips. She thought my presence here was my surrender. "Unity," Daniel echoed hollowly. "We are so lucky." Grandpa Henry did not raise his glass. He just watched her, his eyes unreadable. "You have big ideas for this new chapter. Do you not, Vanessa?" he asked. Vanessa beamed, taking the bait instantly. "Oh, I do. Henry, I really do. I was thinking, once we get the assets consolidated, specifically the sale of the old house and the move to Riverside, we should look into establishing a foundation, the Morgan Family Foundation. I would be happy to direct it. Of course, we could focus on family wellness." I choked back a bitter laugh. Family wellness, from the woman who had slapped me in a loading dock. "A foundation," Grandpa mused. "That requires a lot of capital and a lot of trust." "Well, that is exactly why I have been working so hard," Vanessa said, gesturing with her spoon. "To build that capital, you know, people do not realize how much work goes into managing a family's portfolio. It is a full-time job." "Is it?" Aunt Paula asked, her voice sharp. "I thought Daniel managed the accounts." Vanessa laughed, a dismissive, tinkling sound. "Oh, Paula, you know Daniel. He is a visionary. But details, numbers, that is not his strength. I have had to step in. For his own good, I have spent the last 5 years optimizing our real estate, leveraging equity that was just sitting there, gathering dust." She was bragging. She was actually bragging about the loans. She thought she was speaking the language of business to a table of people she considered beneath her. She framed the debt as leverage and the theft as optimization. "Optimizing," Grandpa repeated. "That is an interesting word. Tell me, Vanessa, in this optimization process, who exactly are you protecting?" "Why, the family." "Of course," Vanessa exclaimed, looking around the table for approval. "I mean, look at the market. It is volatile. If I had not taken the initiative to refinance the house and move that money into more active channels, we would have lost value. I saved us from stagnation." I looked at Cousin Nate. He was staring at Vanessa with the cold, hard gaze of a man who was memorizing a suspect's statement. Marion was quietly taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "It must have been difficult," I said, speaking for the first time. "Handling all that paperwork, the bank meetings, the signatures." Vanessa looked at me, surprised that I had spoken. She clearly interpreted my comment as an attempt to ingratiate myself. "It was exhausting. Paisley," she sighed dramatically. "Truly exhausting. But someone had to do it. Daniel was just too overwhelmed. I took the burden off his shoulders. I dealt with the brokers. I dealt with the lawyers. I made the hard decisions so he did not have to." "So, Daniel did not know the specifics?" Marion asked. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. Vanessa glanced at Marion, annoyed by the interruption from the secretary. "Daniel trusts me," Vanessa snapped. "He knows I act in his best interest. He does not need to be bogged down with the minutiae of interest rates and loan terms. That is what a partnership is." "I see," Marion said, writing something down. "So you acted as his agent, without his direct oversight?" "I acted as his wife," Vanessa corrected haughtily, "and as the person who actually cares about the financial health of this legacy, unlike some people who just want to hoard their paycheck." She shot a glare at me. The table went silent again. The air felt charged with static electricity. Even Daniel seemed to sense the shift. He stopped eating and looked around nervously. "Vanessa is very good with money," Daniel mumbled, reciting his line. She helps me." "I do more than help. Daniel," Vanessa said, placing her hand over his. "I saved us, and soon, when we move to Riverside, everything will be perfect. Henry understands that. Do you not, Henry?" She looked at Grandpa, expecting validation, expecting him to nod and sign the papers she had undoubtedly brought with her in her designer bag. Grandpa Henry placed his spoon down. The sound was like a gavel striking a block. He wiped his mouth with his linen napkin and placed it on the table. He did not smile. He did not blink. He looked at Vanessa with a clarity that was terrifying. "You talk a lot about protection, Vanessa," Grandpa said. His voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. "You talk about saving this family, about burdens, about making hard decisions." "I do," Vanessa nodded eagerly, "because I care. Protection is a funny thing," Grandpa continued, leaning forward slightly. "Sometimes people confuse protection with control, and sometimes they confuse saving a legacy with stealing it." Vanessa's smile faltered. "Henry, what are you saying?" "I am saying," Grandpa said, his eyes locking onto hers, "that I have spent the last week looking at your version of protection. I have looked at the loans. I have looked at the accounts. I have looked at the signatures." Vanessa went pale. She pulled her hand back from Daniel's. I do not understand. I explained everything. It was for the portfolio." "And," Grandpa interrupted, his voice turning to steel, "I have looked at how you treat the people who actually stood in your way." He gestured toward me. "We have talked enough about what you think you deserve, Vanessa," Grandpa said. "And we have heard enough about how lucky we are. But since you are so proud of how you protect this family, perhaps it is time everyone sees what protecting this family actually looks like." He nodded to Marion. Marion stopped writing. She closed her notebook. She reached down into her leather bag and pulled out a small, portable speaker. She placed it in the center of the table, right next to the floral centerpiece. Vanessa stared at the speaker. Her eyes widened. She looked at me, then at Grandpa, then back at the speaker. The blood drained from her face so fast, it looked like she might faint. "What is that?" she whispered. "That," I said, meeting her gaze across the table, "is the invoice for the party, and for the last 10 years. Marion pressed the button. The dining room, with its heavy curtains and expensive china, was suddenly filled with the sound of wind, traffic, and a voice that everyone at the table recognized. "I own him, Paisley. I have papers signed." Vanessa stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. "No," she gasped. "Turn it off." But the recording continued. "You ungrateful, selfish brat." And then the slap. The sound echoed off the walls. Aunt Paula covered her mouth. Daniel dropped his fork. It clattered onto his plate with a deafening chime. The court was in session, and the defendant had just testified against herself. The sound that erupted from the small black speaker was not loud in decibels, but in that silent, high-ceilinged dining room, it hit with the force of a bomb detonation. "I own him. Paisley, I own your father. He does not breathe without checking with me first." The voice was unmistakably Vanessa's. It was not the polished, sugary soprano she used for toasts and charity galas. It was the guttural, jagged voice of the woman in the loading dock. I watched my father across the table. At the first sentence, his head snapped up, his eyes wide and confused, as if he could not reconcile the sound with the wife sitting across from him. He looked at Vanessa, waiting for a punchline, waiting for her to laugh and say it was a bad joke. But Vanessa was not laughing. She was frozen, her hand hovering halfway to her wine glass, her face draining of color until she looked like a wax statue. The recording continued, relentless and clear. "You think you can cut us off? You ungrateful, selfish brat? I raised you." Then came the sound of the struggle, the rustle of fabric, the sharp intake of breath, and then the slap. Thwack! It sounded wet and brutal. It was the sound of flesh striking flesh with intent to harm. Aunt Paula gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Cousin Nate, the detective, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing into slits as his professional instincts took over. He was no longer looking at a family member. He was looking at a perpetrator. "You will not transfer that $80,000 by Monday morning. I will tell your father you struck me. I will bruise myself if I have to." The recording ended with a soft click. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence, the kind of silence that rings in your ears. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, and the ragged breathing of the woman in the gold trousers. Vanessa exploded into motion. "That is fake!" she shrieked, shoving her chair back so hard it toppled over with a deafening crash. "That is edited. She cut it together. She is trying to frame me." She lunged across the table, her manicured claws reaching for the laptop Marion was guarding. She looked feral, her eyes bulging, desperation stripping away every layer of her carefully cultivated poise. "Give me that," she screamed. "It is illegal. You cannot play that." Before she could reach the device, Mr. Henderson, my grandfather's butler of 30 years, a man who usually moved with the invisibility of a ghost, stepped out from the shadows. He did not look like a servant tonight. He stepped between Vanessa and the table, his broad chest acting as a human shield. He did not touch her, but his presence was an immovable wall. "Please sit down, Mrs. Morgan," he said, his voice low and devoid of warmth. "Get out of my way," Vanessa spat, turning to Daniel. "Daniel, do something. Look at what they are doing to me. They are fabricating evidence." My father was trembling. He looked down at his hands, then slowly raised his head to look at me. His eyes were red, filled with a horror that broke my heart. "She called you a wallet," Daniel whispered, his voice cracking. "She said she owns me." "It is out of context," Vanessa yelled, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "We were arguing. Paisley was threatening to cut off your medical care. I was just defending you. Daniel, I was fighting for you." "Defending him?" I asked quietly. It was the first time I had spoken since the tape started. I did not shout. I did not stand up. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. "Is that why you threatened to bruise yourself to frame me? Is that why you demanded $80,000 for a condo he does not want?" "You provoked me," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You lured me out there to trap me." "We are not done," Marion Cole said. Her voice cut through Vanessa's hysteria like a scalpel. Marion turned the laptop around so the screen faced the table. She tapped a key. "Since you claim the audio is fabricated," Marion said coolly, "let us look at something harder to fake. This is a screen recording from your phone. Vanessa, taken 3 days ago." The video played. It was the selfie video Vanessa had recorded in her car. The room watched as digital Vanessa adjusted her hair in the rearview mirror and laughed into her phone. "Do not worry about the old man," the Vanessa on the screen said, a sneer curling her lip. "He is practically senile. I just put a pen in his hand and he signs whatever I want. And the daughter? Please. She is a wallet with legs. I tell her to jump. She asks how high and writes a check for the landing pad." If the audio recording was a slap, this video was a knife to the gut. Grandpa Henry did not flinch. He watched the screen with the cold detachment of a judge, having already seen the evidence, but for the rest of the family, it was the final nail. "Senile," Aunt Paula repeated, her voice trembling with rage. She looked at Vanessa with pure disgust. "You ate at his table, you lived in his house, and you call him senile to a stranger?" "I was venting," Vanessa cried, tears streaming down her face now, angry, panicked tears. "I was stressed. You do not understand the pressure I am under." "The pressure of spending money that is not yours?" Marion asked. She reached into her leather folder and pulled out a stack of documents. She did not pass them around. She fanned them out on the table in front of Daniel. "These are the property records for 42 Oakwood Drive," Marion explained, pointing to the bold red stamps on the paperwork. "And these are the loan documents from 3 separate private equity lenders." Daniel looked down at the papers. He squinted, trying to make sense of the dense legal text. "I do not understand," Daniel stammered. "We refinanced," Vanessa said. "She said we were optimizing the tax position." "There is no optimization. Daniel," Marion said gently, "there is only debt. The house has been refinanced to 95% of its value. And these," she tapped a specific document, "these are high-interest loans taken out against the equity. The money was deposited into an LLC called Morgan Lifestyle Management. Vanessa is the sole signatory. Marion flipped the page to show a withdrawal log. $70,000 to a luxury interior design firm. Marion read. $30,000 to a travel agency. $12,000 to a high-end jeweler. Daniel picked up the paper. His hand shook so badly the paper rattled. He stared at the numbers. He stared at his own signature at the bottom of the loan agreement, and then at the witness signature next to it. Vanessa Morgan. "You told me these were insurance forms," Daniel whispered. He looked up at his wife, his face crumbling. "You told me the insurance company needed to update the policy on the roof. I signed them at the kitchen table while you were making coffee." "I was investing in our image," Vanessa insisted. Though her voice was losing its power, she wiped her face, smearing mascara across her cheek. "You have to spend money to make money. Daniel, I was building a brand for us. I was going to pay it all back once the vlog took off." "With my money?" I asked. The question hung in the air. "You took the loans," I said, keeping my eyes locked on hers. "And when the payments came due, you came to me. You told me Dad needed surgery. You told me the roof was leaking. You told me the boiler exploded. I paid every single invoice, but there was no surgery. There was no boiler. I was just paying the interest on the debt you racked up buying handbags." Daniel looked at me. The realization hit him like a physical wave. He saw the last 10 years rewind in his mind. Every time he had asked me for money, every time he had guilted me into writing a check, he had been unwittingly handing over ammunition to the woman who was bleeding him dry. "Paisley," he choked out. You paid for everything?" "I paid to keep you in the house, Dad," I said softly. "I thought I was saving the house." "The house is gone, Daniel," Marion stated bluntly. "Unless we intervene immediately, the foreclosure process starts in 2 weeks. That is why she needed the $80,000 from Paisley for the condo. She needed a lifeboat because she had already sunk the ship." The room felt small. The air was sucked out of it. Vanessa looked around. She saw the closed faces of the family. She saw Cousin Nate typing something on his phone, likely running her license plate or checking for outstanding warrants. She saw Aunt Paula moving her chair closer to mine, a silent declaration of allegiance. She had one card left to play, the victim card. "You are all ganging up on me," she sobbed, collapsing into her chair and burying her face in her hands. "I tried so hard. I tried to be a good wife. I tried to keep this family afloat while Daniel checked out. Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I borrowed money. But I did it for us. And now you ambush me? You humiliate me?" She looked up, her eyes red and wild, fixing her gaze on me. "And you," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You sat there all week, letting me think we were fine. You let me think you were going to help. You lied to me. Paisley, you are just as manipulative as you say I am." "I survived you," I corrected her. "You provoked me that night," she shouted, desperate to change the narrative. "You got in my face. You insulted me. You edited that tape to take out the part where you attacked me first." "I did not say a word, Vanessa," I said calmly. "The recording runs for 12 minutes. From the moment I walked out the door to the moment you slammed it, I never raised my voice. I never touched you. But you hit me 3 times. I reached up and tucked my hair behind my ear, turning my head slightly so the light hit the lingering yellow-green bruise on my cheekbone. It was faint now, thanks to expensive concealer I had worn earlier. But under the harsh dining room lights, the shadow of the violence was visible. "You hit me," I repeated, "and then you threatened to take my father away from me." Daniel stood up. It was a slow, painful movement, as if he were carrying 1,000 pounds on his back. He gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. He looked at the woman he had defended for a decade. He looked at the papers strewn across the table, the evidence of his betrayal. "You hit her?" Daniel asked. His voice was quiet, terrified. "She was hysterical. Daniel!" Vanessa cried, reaching for him. "I had to snap her out of it." Daniel pulled back as if she were made of fire. "You hit my daughter," he said, the words gaining strength. You called me a senile old man. You stole my house. But you hit my daughter. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my father, not the puppet Vanessa had constructed, but the man who used to teach me how to ride a bike, the man who used to call me his little genius. I signed everything, Daniel whispered, tears rolling down his cheeks. I signed it all because I trusted you. I defended you to everyone. I lost my friends for you. I pushed my father away for you. He took a shuddering breath. I pushed Paisley away for you. Daniel, please, Vanessa begged, standing up and moving toward him. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. Do not let them poison you against me. Sit down, Grandpa Henry commanded. The authority in his voice was absolute. It stopped Vanessa in her tracks. She turned to look at the head of the table. Grandpa Henry had not moved. He sat in his wheelchair, his hands resting on the armrests, looking at Vanessa with a mixture of pity and executioner's resolve. You thought you were playing a game with a senile old man and a weak girl, Grandpa said. You thought because we loved Daniel, we were blind. But love does not make you blind. Vanessa, sometimes, love makes you patient. We waited, we watched, and we let you show us exactly who you are. I am his wife, Vanessa snarled, trying to regain her footing. I have rights. I have a share in this estate. You have nothing, Grandpa said, because 10 minutes ago, before we sat down to dinner, Daniel signed a new document, a revocation of all previous powers of attorney, and Marion filed a temporary restraining order against you on behalf of the estate, citing elder abuse and financial fraud. Vanessa's mouth fell open. She looked at Daniel. He did not look at her. He was looking at me, mouthing the word, sorry. You are not just leaving this house tonight, Grandpa continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming a low rumble of finality. You are leaving this family. You are leaving the social circles you tried so hard to climb into, because tomorrow morning, every single person in that country club, every banker in the city, and every creditor you lied to is going to receive a copy of the public filing of this lawsuit. Vanessa looked around the room. She saw the walls closing in. There was no charm left to use, no lies left to spin. The evidence was on the table. The recording was in the cloud, and the family she had tried to divide was standing united against her. You cannot do this to me, she whispered, her voice trembling. I will ruin you. I will tell the press. Tell them what? I asked. That you beat your stepdaughter behind a hotel because she refused to buy you a condo? Go ahead. Play the tape for them. Vanessa, I am sure the internet will love it. She glared at me, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. This is not over, she hissed. Oh, it is over, Grandpa Henry said. You did not just hit my granddaughter behind the house. Vanessa, you struck the one person who was actually paying for the lifestyle you felt entitled to. You bit the hand that fed you, and then you tried to break the fingers. He pointed to the door. Get out, before Nate arrests you for trespassing. Vanessa looked at Nate. He crossed his arms and nodded toward the exit. It is time to go, Vanessa, Nate said calmly. She stood there for one last second, looking at the ruin of her schemes. Then, with a strangled cry of rage, she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the room. We heard her heels clicking frantically on the hardwood floor of the hallway, then the heavy slam of the front door, followed by the roar of her SUV engine peeling out of the driveway. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was clean. It was the silence of a fever breaking. Daniel sank back into his chair, putting his head in his hands, and began to weep. I stood up and walked down the length of the table. I did not go to the door to lock it. I went to my father. I wrapped my arms around his shoulders, feeling him shake, and for the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel like a wallet. I felt like a daughter. Grandpa Henry watched us from the head of the table, his face grim but satisfied. He reached out and touched the laptop, closing the lid, silencing the voice of the woman who would never hurt us again. The silence that followed the end of the recording was not the kind that brought peace. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a structure collapsing in slow motion. The air in the dining room felt thin, charged with the electricity of a storm that had finally broken. Vanessa stood near the door, her chest heaving, her hand gripping the strap of her purse as if it were a lifeline. She looked at the faces around the table, searching for a crack in the wall of judgment, but she found none. Marion Cole cleared her throat. The sound was sharp and precise, cutting through the emotional haze like a gavel. She did not look at Vanessa with anger. She looked at her with the dispassionate focus of a surgeon locating a tumor. "Based on the audio evidence you just heard," Marion announced, her voice steady and projecting to every corner of the room, "along with the forensic accounting audit completed by Mr. Franklin and the digital footprint analysis provided by Paisley, we have sufficient grounds to move forward immediately. This is no longer a family dispute. Vanessa, this is a criminal matter." Marion gestured to the two men who had been sitting quietly at a small side table near the entrance. They had been introduced earlier as associates from Marion's firm, present to witness signatures. Now, they stood up and buttoned their jackets. The shift in their demeanor was instant. They were not lawyers. They were law enforcement. "Detectives Miller and Kowalski," Marion said. "They are with the fraud division. They have heard everything." Vanessa stumbled back, her heels catching on the edge of the rug. "Police? You brought police into a family dinner?" One of the detectives, a tall man with a grim face, stepped forward. He pulled a folded document from his inside pocket. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, his tone flat, "we have a warrant for the seizure of your electronic devices and a subpoena for your financial records regarding the accounts of Daniel Morgan and the Henry Morgan Trust. We are also serving you with a temporary protective order filed by Paisley Henry." He extended the paper. Vanessa did not take it. She stared at it as if it were contaminated. The detective simply placed it on the antique credenza next to her. "This is insane," Vanessa whispered, her voice trembling. She spun around, looking wildly for an ally. Her eyes landed on my father. "Daniel!" she cried out, rushing toward him, though she stopped short when Mr. Henderson, the butler, took a subtle step forward. "Daniel, look at what they are doing to me. They are treating me like a criminal. Tell them to stop. Tell them to get out of our house." My father did not answer immediately. He was sitting slumped in his chair, his face a mask of gray ash. He looked older than I had ever seen him, as if the last 10 years had aged him in 10 minutes. He looked at the loan documents scattered on the table. Then he looked at me. "Paisley," he said. His voice was a broken whisper, barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. "Is it true?" I met his gaze. "Is what true, Dad?" "The money," he rasped. He gestured vaguely toward the opulent room, the clothes he was wearing, the life he thought he was leading. "She said, on the tape, she called you a wallet. Did you pay for it? All of it?" I swallowed hard. The instinct to protect him, to lie and say, "It wasn't that bad," rose up in my throat. That was the habit of a lifetime. But Grandpa Henry was watching me from the head of the table. His eyes were fierce, demanding the truth. No more secrets. His look said, "Yes, Dad," I said softly. "How much?" Daniel asked. Tears began to track through the deep lines on his face. "Do not lie to me, please. I need to know how much I owe my own daughter." I took a breath. "I paid the mortgage for the last 24 months. That is roughly $3,500 a month. I paid the property taxes for 3 years. I paid off the credit card bill you thought was for house repairs, which was $18,000. I paid for the country club dues. I paid for your dental surgery. I paid for the new transmission in the SUV." I paused, my own voice wavering slightly as I listed the cost of my silence. "And the emergency loans," I added. "The times Vanessa called me crying, saying you were in trouble, or the IRS was auditing us, or the roof was caving in. I transferred $5,000 here, $10,000 there, in total. Dad, over the last 5 years, I have put about $200,000 into keeping this house afloat." A gasp went around the table. Aunt Paula looked horrified. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut, his hands gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. $200,000, he repeated, the number choking him. And I thought the business was doing well. She told me the investments were paying dividends. There are no dividends, Daniel, Grandpa Henry said. He slid a new stack of papers across the polished mahogany surface. There is only leakage, and tonight we are plugging the hole. Grandpa placed his hand on the documents. This, Grandpa stated, is a formal revocation of all authority, effective immediately. Vanessa Morgan is removed as a signatory on any account bearing the Morgan name. Her credit cards have been canceled as of 10 minutes ago. The locks on the townhouse are being changed by a locksmith right now, and this order freezes your joint accounts. Daniel, to prevent her from draining whatever is left before the investigation is complete. Vanessa stared at the papers, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The reality of her situation was crashing down. No money, no access, no power. You cannot do that, she shrieked. I am his wife. Half of that is mine. Marital assets. Marital assets are for marriages, Grandpa said coldly. Not for long cons. You used his identity to secure loans he did not understand. You forged his digital signature. That pierces the marital veil. Vanessa, you are not a wife tonight. You are a liability. Daniel! Vanessa screamed again, falling to her knees beside his chair. She grabbed his arm, shaking him. Do not listen to them. They are poisoning you. Paisley has always been jealous of me. She has hated me since the day I walked in the door. She wants to destroy our happiness because she is miserable and alone. My father looked down at her. For years, that touch, that desperate plea, would have worked. He would have melted. He would have defended her. But tonight, he had heard the sound of her hand striking my face. She did not poison me, Daniel said. His voice was gaining strength, fueled by a deep, agonizing anger. She paid for me. She protected me, while you were selling me piece by piece. I did it for us, Vanessa sobbed, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. I wanted us to have a good life. Daniel, is that a crime? Wanting nice things? Wanting to be respected? You wanted a life you did not earn, I said, looking down at her. And when the money ran out, you hit me. It was one time, Vanessa yelled, looking up at me with wild eyes. One time I lost my temper, and you are going to ruin my life for it? It was not one time, Aunt Paula spoke up from the side of the table. Her voice was trembling but defiant. Last Christmas, you told me Daniel needed $5,000 for a heart specialist. I wrote you a check. I never told Daniel because you said he would be embarrassed. Paula looked at my father. You never saw a heart specialist, did you, Daniel? No, Daniel whispered. And me, Cousin Nate added, leaning forward. 2 years ago, you said you needed a bridge loan for a business permit. $4,000. You said the city was holding up the paperwork. I gave it to you cash. The room filled with the murmur of confessions, one by one. The family members who had been silenced by Vanessa's triangulation realized they had all been victims. Small amounts here, large amounts there. She had farmed the family like a crop. The detective stepped closer. Mrs. Morgan, the recording establishes a clear pattern of coercion. The bank logs show the transfers. The deed shows the unauthorized liens. We have enough here to hold you for questioning regarding grand larceny and elder abuse. We suggest you come with us quietly. Vanessa looked at the detective, then back at Daniel. She realized the act was over. The tears stopped abruptly. The trembling ceased. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and stood up. When she looked at us now, the fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard sneer. The mask of the victim dropped, revealing the predator underneath. Fine, she spat. Fine. So I spent some money. So what? Everyone takes a little off the top. You people have so much of it. You did not even notice it was gone until she started counting pennies. She gestured at me with disdain. I gave him the best years of my life, Vanessa hissed, looking at Daniel with contempt. I listened to his boring stories. I nursed his hypochondria. I played the doting wife. I earned every single dollar I spent. You think this was easy? Living with a man who is half a ghost, pining for a dead wife? Daniel recoiled, as if she had slapped him. The cruelty of her words stripped away the last shred of his delusion. "You never loved me," Daniel whispered. It was not a question. It was a devastating realization. "I love the lifestyle," Vanessa said with a shrug, her voice turning icy. "I love the name, and I certainly love the credit limit. If you were too stupid to read what you were signing, that is on you, Daniel. Do not blame me for being smarter than you." The room went dead silent. She had admitted it. She had justified it. She had laid bare the transaction that had been the foundation of their marriage. Daniel stood up. He was shaking, but he stood tall. He pointed a trembling finger at the door. "Get out," he said. "I need to pack my things," Vanessa said defiantly. "You take nothing," Daniel roared, a sound that startled everyone. "You take the clothes on your back and you get out of my father's house. You do not touch another thing that belongs to this family." "Daniel, be reasonable," she started, her eyes darting to the silver candlesticks on the table. "I am done being reasonable," Daniel shouted, his face flushing red. "I chose you over my friends. I chose you over my father. I almost chose you over my daughter. I will never forgive myself for that. Now get out before I let Nate drag you out." Vanessa looked at Nate. The detective nodded slowly, his hand resting near his belt. "Let us go. Mrs. Morgan," the detective said, "we can discuss your packing arrangements from the precinct." Vanessa straightened her jacket. She tried to summon the dignity of the socialite she pretended to be, but her hands were shaking. She walked toward the door, flanked by the two detectives. As she passed me, she stopped. She leaned in close, ignoring the detective who tried to usher her forward. Her eyes were black holes of malice. "You think you won," she whispered, her voice low and venomous. "But you just blew up your own life, sweetie. He will never be the same. You broke him to save a few dollars. I hope you are happy. You will regret the day you turned this family against me." I looked her in the eye. I did not blink. I did not flinch. "I did not turn anyone against you, Vanessa," I said calmly. "You did that all by yourself. You did it the minute you decided that my father was a bank account instead of a person, and you sealed your fate the minute you raised your hand to me." "Move," the detective ordered, taking Vanessa by the elbow. She yanked her arm away but kept walking. We watched her march out into the hallway. The front door opened, letting in a gust of cold night air. Then it slammed shut, cutting off her presence like a severed limb. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house. Daniel collapsed back into his chair. He put his face in his hands and began to sob, deep, wrenching sobs of a man mourning 10 years of his life. "I am sorry," he choked out, over and over again. "Paisley, I am so sorry." I walked over to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "It is okay. Dad, she is gone." "I let her hurt you." He wept. "I let her steal from you." "We stopped her," Grandpa Henry said from the head of the table. His voice was rough with emotion. "That is what matters. We stopped her." Marion began gathering the papers, her face solemn. The legal battle was just beginning. I knew. There would be depositions. There would be arguments about assets. But the immediate threat, the parasite that had been feeding on us, had been excised. I looked at the empty chair where Vanessa had sat. I looked at the bruise she had left on my face. She was right about one thing. My father would never be the same. None of us would. But as I looked around the room at my family, shaken, battered, but finally awake, I knew I would not regret this. The control she had held over us had shattered along with her image. We were broke. We were hurt. But we were free. 3 days later, the air in Marion Cole's law office smelled of lemon polish and expensive parchment. It was a stark contrast to the smell of diesel and fear that had choked me in the loading dock, or the scent of betrayal that had permeated the dining room. Here, in the quiet sanctuary of legal counsel, the atmosphere was sterile, precise, and safe. I sat in a leather chair that felt large enough to swallow me whole, flanked by Grandpa Henry on one side and my father on the other. The document lying on the mahogany desk between us was thick, bound in a blue folder, and it represented the complete restructuring of the Morgan legacy. Marian adjusted her glasses and tapped the page with a manicured finger. "This is the final draft of the irrevocable trust," she said, her voice calm and professional. "As discussed, the majority of the liquid assets, the trucking company shares, and the real estate portfolio are being transferred directly to Paisley Henry. She is named the primary beneficiary and the sole executor." I looked at the paper, seeing my name there, printed in bold legal font, felt surreal. For 10 years, I had been the invisible scaffolding holding this family up. Now, I was the foundation. And regarding Daniel, Marian continued, looking gently at my father, "We have established the support trust. It covers all housing costs, medical insurance, and a monthly stipend for living expenses. It ensures he will never be homeless, and he will never lack for care. However, there is a stipulation." She flipped the page to a section highlighted in yellow. "We call this the predator clause," Grandpa Henry rumbled, his voice sounding stronger than it had in months. Marian nodded. "The clause states that no future spouse, partner, or cohabitant of Daniel Morgan may have access to residency in or legal claim upon any property owned by the trust without the express written consent of Paisley Henry. Furthermore, any attempt by Daniel to leverage, mortgage, or borrow against these assets will trigger an immediate freeze of the discretionary stipend." My father looked at the document. He did not argue. He did not flinch. He simply nodded, a look of profound shame and relief washing over his face. "It is for the best," Daniel whispered. "I proved that I cannot be trusted to guard the gate. I let the wolf in. I gave her the keys." "You were manipulated, Dad," I said softly. "I was willing," he corrected me, looking up with watery eyes. "That is the hard part. Paisley, I was willing because it was easier than being lonely. I let her take from you because I did not want her to take her attention away from me. I sold your security to buy my own comfort." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. His hand was shaking, a tremor that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with the withdrawal from the dopamine of Vanessa's lies. "I wrote this for you," he said, sliding it across the desk. "I cannot say it out loud yet without breaking down, but I need you to read it later." I took the letter. I could feel the weight of it. The meeting moved on to the civil suit. Marian opened a second file, this one thinner but far more satisfying. "Vanessa has accepted the settlement terms," Marian announced. Her lawyers advised her that if she went to trial, with the recording and the fraud evidence, she would be looking at a minimum of 5 to 7 years in state prison. She chose poverty over a cell. "What are the terms?" I asked. "She is liquidating everything." Marian listed, ticking off the items on her fingers: the jewelry, the designer wardrobe, the lease on the SUV is being terminated, the contents of her personal storage unit are being auctioned. The proceeds will go toward paying off the high-interest loans she took out in Daniel's name. "And the rest of the debt?" I asked. Grandpa Henry leaned forward. "I am covering the balance. It is a lot of money, but I will not have creditors circling my son. We are wiping the slate clean. But Vanessa? She leaves this marriage with 0. Actually, less than 0. She is responsible for her own legal fees." "She agreed to that?" I asked, amazed that someone as greedy as Vanessa would walk away with nothing. "She did not have a choice," Grandpa said with a grim smile. "I told her if she signed the agreement, I would seal the forensic accounting report. If she fought us, I would hand it to the district attorney and personally pay for the prosecution." She realized she had played her last card. "So she is gone," I said, the reality finally sinking in. "She is gone," Marian confirmed. "She is moving back to her hometown in Ohio. She has no access to the Morgan name, no claim on the estate, and a permanent restraining order preventing her from coming within 500 feet of any of you." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 18 years old. My father started therapy the next day. It was not a magical cure. He was a man who had been hollowed out. His identity merged with a narcissist for a decade. He had to relearn who he was without her voice in his ear telling him what to think. But he was trying. He asked me to dinner, a cheap, quiet dinner at a diner, paid for with cash from his own wallet. We sat in a booth, eating burgers, and for the first time, the conversation was real. He did not brag about false investments. He did not parrot Vanessa's opinions. He talked about the weather. He talked about a book he was reading. And then, he talked about me. "I treated you like a resource," he said, looking at his coffee cup. "I called you my daughter, but I treated you like an ATM. I am so sorry. Paisley, I do not expect you to forgive me yet, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to pay you back. Not in money, but in respect." I looked at him. I saw the regret etched into the lines of his face. "I accept your apology. Dad," I said firmly, "but things are different now. The bank is closed. I am your daughter, not your safety net. If we are going to have a relationship, it has to be built on honesty. No more secrets, no more hidden debts." "I promise," he said. Later that week, I went to the lake house. It was a Friday evening, the sun dipping low over the water, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. The house was quiet. Grandpa Henry was sitting on the back porch, a blanket over his legs, watching the birds. I walked out and sat on the steps next to his wheelchair. "We did it. Grandpa," I said, "the papers are filed. The liens are released." "Not bad for an old man who does not know how to use a smartphone." He chuckled, tapping his temple. She really thought I was a dinosaur. Did she not? She forgot that before we had the cloud, we had filing cabinets, and before we had encryption, we had poker faces. I have been bluffing bullies since before she was born. He reached down beside his chair and picked up a heavy manila envelope. He handed it to me. "What is this?" I asked. "Your inheritance," he said, "or at least, the keys to it." I opened the envelope. Inside was a set of heavy iron keys, the keys to the lake house. There was also a piece of paper with a series of codes for the wall safe in the master bedroom. And there was a smaller handwritten note on his personal stationery. I unfolded the note. His handwriting was spidery but strong. "You deserve this not because you are my blood, but because you told the truth at the moment it cost you the most. You protected this house when everyone else was trying to sell it. Now, it protects you." I looked up at him, tears stinging my eyes. "I do not need a reward, Grandpa." "It is not a reward, Paisley," he said softly. "It is a baton pass. I am tired. I held the line as long as I could, but I saw you in that dining room. I saw you stare her down. I saw you play that recording and watch your world burn down just to save it. You are the matriarch now. You are the one who decides who gets in and who stays out." He looked out at the lake. "Vanessa was a lesson," he said, "a collection of expensive lessons, but we learned them. We survived." I stood up and walked down the grassy slope to the edge of the water. I stood in the backyard, in the exact same spot where I used to play as a child. But the memory of the frightened little girl was gone. The memory of the compliant daughter who wrote checks to buy love was gone. Even the memory of the woman being beaten behind the hotel felt distant now. That woman had been a victim. The woman standing by the lake was a survivor. I realized then that the recording on my phone was not just evidence of a crime. It was the documentation of a death. The death of the person I used to be. Vanessa had tried to break me, but she had only broken the shell that was confining me. She had forced me to find my spine. I took a deep breath of the cool, clean air. It smelled of pine and water, not diesel and perfume. It smelled like freedom. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Cousin Nate. "Just heard the settlement is official. She is leaving the state tomorrow morning. Is it over?" I looked at the screen. I looked at the house behind me, standing strong and safe against the darkening sky. I looked at my grandfather on the porch, and I thought of my father finally sleeping in a bed that was not built on lies. I typed my reply. "No, it is not over. That implies we just finished something. This is a beginning. The story is just mine now. I hit send. I put the phone away. And for the first time in my life, I walked back toward my family's house not as a guest, not as a servant, and not as a wallet. I walked in as the owner. The door opened easily under my hand, and I stepped into the light, leaving the darkness outside where it belonged. Thank you so much for listening to this story on our channel. Please comment down below where you are listening from so we can connect and share our thoughts together. And do not forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like the video, and hit the hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.